Good morning, everyone. My name is Grace Taylor. I'm a student with Lutheran Campus Ministry at the University of Minnesota. Thank you for tuning in to service today during these chaotic times. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be with you all and for the way you have invited me to be part of your community, even if today looks a little bit different than a typical Sunday at Christ on Capitol Hill. At Lutheran Campus Ministry, LCM for short, we take pride in being curious, being real, and being community. We publish this phrase on our website, we put it on our t-shirts, and we do our best to put it into practice. This gospel text we just read together can seem overwhelming on a normal day, let alone a day like today. I'd like to think that it stands as another example of what it means to be real, to be curious, and to be community. I'd like to show you how. I think we can all agree that this passage is about a miraculous story of healing. As we recall, as long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Having said these things, he spit on the ground and made mud with saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud and said to him, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam." So he went and washed and came back seeing. We all agreed that this passage is about the healing of a man who was born blind. Yet the actual healing, the excerpt I just read, is finished by verse 8, and the passage continues through to verse 41. Why is this so? Keep this thought for a moment and let's acknowledge something else. Let's admit that healing rarely looks this way in our daily lives. If I were to take a poll of the congregation today and ask how healing has shown up in your lives, I don't think anyone would write to me and say, "I met Jesus, he spit on me, and I am no longer blind." So let's combine these two separate thoughts. Why is this passage that is so centered around healing barely talking about the physical and literal healing taking place? And why is it that this passage seems so far removed from the kind of healing that we experience today? At LCM, we participate in a practice or tradition we call blessing bowls. It is based around the experiences we, the students, have within the context of our faith. When we first enter the LCM community, we receive a bowl. With each major event we face or have experienced in the past, we take a token to remind us of the event and we place it in our bowl. For example, loss is a stone you could take and place in your bowl, symbolizing that this was a time in your faith where you experienced loss and the feelings, questions, and emotions that came with it. Periodically throughout the semester, we as a community take time to lift up and bring to light some of the stories that are associated with the stones we place in our blessing bowls. During an LCM worship service about 2 months ago, we took some time to share stories of healing. I have struggled with my mental health for most of my life, and I've been seeking treatment since about the age of 16. Since then, I've been on 4 different medications. I've been a patient at the Mayo Clinic, and about a year ago, my depression and anxiety was so bad that I moved back home to Northfield, Minnesota, and I considered not continuing my education at the University of Minnesota, just so I could take some time to try to get on the path of a normal life again. This being said, when we were sitting there reading a poem about healing and worship, I realized without knowing how or when that I had achieved a sense of wholeness again. Pastor Kate asked us to turn to a neighbor and share a time when we needed healing, my mind jumped to that place I was a year ago when I could barely get out of bed. It was clear to me how far I had come and how strange it was for me to be at peace and to experience joy in my daily life. It seemed so sudden and drawn out at the exact same time. Within this gospel text, there are so many characters, and each one of them is bringing a different perspective to the situation. Where I am at in my healing journey, I feel a lot like the blind man when he is trying to explain himself to the Pharisees. He answers, "Whether he is a sinner, I do not know. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see." I don't quite know how or exactly I was healed, and although it wasn't as literal and physical as in our story today, I do know that a transformation took place, and I do believe that Jesus had something to do with it. Maybe you are feeling more like the disciples, who in the very beginning wanted to know why the man was born blind, and why, and if this was a way of punishing sinners. Maybe you feel more like the Pharisees, who simply want to understand how all of this is possible. Maybe you're stuck in disbelief or questioning. Whatever you are feeling in this time of chaos or in your own journey, know that it is valid and that there is still room to come alive. As I mentioned earlier, this gospel text can seem overwhelming on a normal day, let alone this current state of uncertainty. Sometimes I think, who am I to get up in front of a congregation amidst a crisis and tell them about healing? But I can only hope that by speaking to my experience and by sharing my perspective, I've given you a starting place to make peace with where you are within the healing journey and remind you that even here, grace abounds. I've come to understand that healing is not linear. Jesus does not promise that we won't suffer. He does not promise to take away all of our pain, and he does not promise to heal us in an instant. He does promise to be present in the struggle. He promises that he will see you through the other side. The current state of our world can be a lot to take in. We're all in need of healing in more than one way. My challenge is to embrace God on God's terms. Embrace healing on God's terms. Lean into the circumstances and trust that Christ will see us through. The bottom line is that this story, yes, is about healing. But as we see in the characters that play out this story, whatever perspective you have right now, there is room to ask questions, to be curious, to practice honesty, to be real, and to turn to one another, to be community. Thank you for allowing me to be with you all today. I hope we have a time in the near future to meet in person and chat more about Lutheran Campus Ministry and all things healing.